hard to know exactly what the prevalence of mental health issues amongst children with special educational needs and disabilities, but the research that I've read suggests it might be up to 4 times as likely for children with SEND to have a mental health issue as it is for their peers. Why could that be? Why would we be seeing such a large number of mental health issues amongst these students? First of all, it's important to acknowledge that pupils with SEND are not all the same. So the underlying drivers here might be quite different from child to child, because at the end of the day, when we're thinking about pupils with SEND, we might on the one hand be thinking about one child with severe PMLD, so profound and multiple learning difficulties. This might be a child who has an entirely sensory curriculum, can't communicate verbally at all, and might be working developmentally many years behind their peers. On the other hand, we might be talking about a high-functioning teenager with autism whose signs were not even picked up until really late because it was so well masked. So, it's very, very different ends of the spectrum and lots of different things in between, of course. Here are some of the reasons, because I think when we get our head around some of the reasons that might be driving this kind of emotional stress and mental health issues, then, of course, we can begin to understand what universal approaches we might sometimes be able to take to try and promote the well-being and mental health, as well as meet the needs of those individuals who are struggling. So firstly, communication skills. If your special educational need or disability means that it's more difficult for you to communicate for others, that in and of itself can result in emotional distress. We work very hard in our curriculum these days to teach children from a very young age to be emotionally literate, to be able to recognise and respond to the different things that they feel, to be able to ask for help when needed and problem solve around how to manage and thrive. If a child isn't able to communicate the way that they're feeling, it's very difficult for them to get the help that they need with that. But also we know that sometimes with difficult stuff, you've got to name it in order to be able to tame it. And as soon as we're able to voice or otherwise communicate our worries, then we can begin to take next steps towards taking control of them or passing them on. If a child is unable to do that, maybe because they're non-verbal, maybe because they are deaf and they're not in a native deaf environment, or maybe because they have language delay, then this can all impact on their ability to communicate about how they're feeling and to get the appropriate support, which can lead to emotional distress from not being able to communicate that in the first instance, and of course to needs not being met. So here, our key question would be, how can we help young people with SEND to develop an appropriate way of communicating how they're feeling? Sometimes that will take a great degree of imagination and perhaps knowing the student really, really well. The next reason why we might see this elevation in mental health issues is because sometimes pupils with special educational needs and disabilities might be less able to develop coping skills to help them manage day to day with the difficult things they're feeling. So they're not able to name it and talk about it and ask for help, but they're also perhaps not so well equipped with healthy coping skills. Again, we build this in now as quite a standard part of our curriculum for children, but there might be some children who are more able to learn these strategies and apply them than others. Again, children who have got barriers to learning or barriers to doing might find it harder to employ the kinds of coping skills that we're teaching them. So the question here would be thinking about, if you're working with learners with SEND, how can we develop coping skills that are suitable for them, that work for them, that they're able to understand and use when needed? Next, there's an issue around emotional literacy and regulation. So again, because perhaps some of these learners have developmental delay or they find it harder to process and understand some of the learning and the world, we might find that their emotional literacy is less good than their peers of a similar age. And we may also find that their emotional regulation is less mature than that of their peers. So the emotional regulation question might be partly that we're working with learners who are less able to understand what they need to do. So that kind of goes with the coping skills. They might be less able to recognise, name and respond to different feelings. But there are also many conditions that might result in more fluctuation of mood and feeling, which therefore makes it harder to manage. So for example, children who are on the autistic spectrum will often feel very, very anxious a lot of the time. And so it's much more difficult for them to manage and regulate. It'd be like the equivalent of someone who is neurotypical suddenly being plunged into feeling fight, flight, fright all the time and being expected just to manage that. If you suddenly found yourself in a state of constant panic, it would be difficult to manage. And then, of course, there's the distress or the difference that's directly caused by their condition. So, for example, children on the autistic spectrum will very often feel very anxious. That often goes right alongside the condition. In addition to that, they might feel that they don't really fit in with their peers, and they might be acutely aware of that but not know how to overcome it or feel comfortable doing that. Equally, some children with disability or illness might be in pain a lot of the time, and that in itself can wear us down and make it much more difficult to manage. And many children with disability and special needs can be acutely aware of the fact that they're not like their friends, or that they cause kind of stress or anxiety to their family, and this can in and of itself bring a sense of kind of guilt or shame. The other thing never to underestimate is that children at every level will often compare themselves to each other, and sometimes this can cause distress too. With this, we need to be not afraid to talk about it and to explore it. It's often a bit of the elephant in the room, and we just don't think to chat about how a child might feel about having a special need or a disability, but it's a really, really big deal, and there's often some really hard conversations to be had there. But children do need reassurance, and they do need to be helped to find their super strengths and the things that they can do, even if there are some things that they can't do. If you found this video helpful, you might be interested to learn more about YouCan. YouCan is our new, ever-growing, on-demand video CPD service for schools. Each course is made up of a series of modules just like the one you've just watched. Each module is designed to be highly practical with ideas that you can use right away. We're growing our library of courses every week to meet the demands of our subscribers. There's a huge wealth of training that you and your colleagues will be able to access if your school subscribes. Our short, practical videos make it easy and enjoyable to learn, so you can do anything you set your mind to.